Good evening, and welcome back to the weird and the wonderful with Strange Bones. I do hope you are ready for an interesting evening discussing all things paranormal and supernatural. And as per our usual, we are going to go around the world looking at different countries and cultures to see what they have to tell us about ghosts and things that might, perhaps, potentially, go bump in the night. I do hope that you find yourself very, very welcome. And as per normal, we shall begin with just a little housekeeping, as it were. And I shall remind you that on this channel we appreciate all different opinions on everything, whether it be positive or negative. But we do insist on politeness, and if there is rudeness involved, we will give you the boot, because after all, there is no need for rudeness. But barring that, we absolutely do enjoy and appreciate all comments and interest. And please feel very, very free to like, share, subscribe, and all the rest of it in order to support the channel and keep it going. And I do hope that you will have fun while you are here. You need not believe, you need not believe, but we do rather enjoy if people will at least have fun, learn a little about the interesting things that are out there and more. I do wish to apologize, by the way, that we did not have a live last night, unfortunately, and I do beg you not to laugh too hard. I managed to get a slight concussion due to being suitably bopped during training, and it left me really not feeling very good at all. So the net result was I was not able to do my normal live, and I do apologize for that. But I'm back and much better now. So there is that. But yes, thank you all for being here. And as you know, we go to the different countries and cultures, and we look at the different places, and we pick a specific place each live to consider, to look at, to see what we might find. Much thanks there for the likes. Always appreciate a good like. So thank you very, very much indeed. But for today, we are going to be going to the rather mythical and certainly a very traditional island of Scotland. So there's a lot of history and a lot of fierce battles and more, as we well know. So I'm sure we will find a great number of suitable hauntings and strange creatures to talk about, and possibly a dram or two of whiskey. This is only tea, I'm afraid. No whiskey at the moment, but we would very much probably get a lively live if we had some. But as we progress, Scotland the Brave. Did you know a very interesting fact? One of the things about the British Isles in general is that the Romans conquered quite a bit of it, but they reached a certain line across the country where they found the people going north were just so fierce that they could not go any further. And so they built a wall and said, yeah, there's nothing there that anybody wants anyway. Bit of an excuse, but dearie me. And of course, as we know, Scotland has ever been a proud and very dangerous nation with great strength. So I think that we will find a lot of interesting things. And of course, um, even towards the very beginning of my research into what was out there, what might be out there, turned up so much that I dare say tonight we will barely touch on all of the things that can be found in the time that we have, simply because there really is a great deal and some interesting stories. And of course, as is proper for uh, a countryside like Scotland, some particularly good castles as well. We have the Green Lady from Crassus Castle, the Mackenzie Poltergeist in Edinburgh, and a great deal more with castles, graveyards, caves, and very strange things. We will touch on Glamis Castle, which they say has multiple ghosts that include Earl Beardy, a cruel figure associated with a card game played with the devil, and Jack the Runner, a black slave hunted by the earls who haunted them in return. Good for him. Uh, if you can't get revenge in life, get it in death, and why not? Crassus Castle's Green Lady, of course, is a recurring Scottish figure. We have the Greyfriars Churchyard in Edinburgh, where the Mackenzie poltergeist is the vengeful spirit of George Mackenzie, known for his harsh treatment of the Covenanters. St. Andrew's Cathedral, where we have some friendly ghosts and maybe less friendly. What is my opinion on the afterlife? That is a very interesting question. I'm going to give my answer in two answers because, first of all, um, I can honestly tell you I've never been there. And because I have never been there, I cannot say anything for certain. There are opinions that I have based on belief, but after all, it is only belief. However, I can tell you this. It does appear from my research into hauntings and the haunted that 99% of those that die go somewhere. Where exactly it might be is in question, but they do indeed go there. There is a somewhere that we go. Ghosts are what happened on the rare occasions when we don't go when we ought. Now, do I believe that there is life after death? Okay, that is maybe not intentionally, but that is a loaded question because life after death. Well, I'm not sure if it would be life as we know it or if we would class it as life. Is there something after death? Yes, I do believe that there is. Um, even a number of the religions that believe in reincarnation say it is not a circle but a spiral, whereby eventually you either get off at the top or the bottom. Either you're too awful to go on and go to wherever bad things go, or you um, you get the option, as it were, to thank you, my love. See, I get looked after. I get hot water bottles. Um, or you go on to the good bit if you have proved yourself suitably good. So it seems that pretty much everybody do believe that there is a good place to go and a bad place to go, dependent. In my own opinion, I would say that I do believe that there is an afterlife, and that um, it does depend on your showing, as it were, in this life as to what you get. Um, whether or not it relies on your specific religion, I sometimes have doubts, and here is my reasoning behind. I have met people who were very, very religious and absolute bastards. And it seems to me that merely because you belong to a faith does guarantee nothing. Whereas I've met people who claimed to believe in nothing at all, but they were particularly decent people, and I would like to think, shall we say, that there would absolutely be a something for the good that they were. I'm one of these people. Okay, a lot of people will tell you over and over again that it's all about what comes next and all about being able to get to that good thing. I do not believe that. I believe that we are here very much for a reason. We have lessons to learn and things to do and become. Um, and our focus should, in fact, not at all be on the afterlife. It should be on this life, and we should leave the afterlife to those that judge it or should judge it in that regard. If that does that make sense? I do agree with you. Religion does not make you a good person at all. Um, it's all about whether or not you've made use of uh, the chance you've had to become a better human being in that regard. Of course, you might argue, what is it that makes you a better human being? And there are probably 40 million decisions as to what that might be and more. But I feel fairly confident in saying that don't be a bastard and you're probably going to be okay. And thank you for that. I appreciate that you like the vibe, and I will tell you that absolutely, unless things go wrong, 6 days of the week, I do a live GMT +2. That's 10 o'clock South African time. I don't know where you are, but I'm in South Africa, so that's when I do it, and you would be always welcome on the channel. But yes, I believe that be a decent person, and whatever your religion, I think you will probably do pretty well. 10 p.m. it is. Eddie, you are a star. Ah, Karina, my darling sweet, how welcome you are back here. Thank you so much for the gifties and all the loves. You are a star as always, and always welcome here as well. I do hope you are enjoying. We're doing Scotland, by the way. Scotland the Brave, to look at what spooky things we can discover. So, hello to you. I hope you are in the mood for some tartan ghosts. And we are starting, of course, with the more famous of the stories and things that go bump in the night. And we are starting with Culzean Castle, which is, interestingly enough, a pretty nice one. Still in pretty good nick. Uh, it's on the Ayrshire Cliffs, and it is a masterpiece built by the famed Robert Adam. However, However, it is, while an architectural joy, it is shrouded in tales of terrible deeds and evil spirits. In 1570, the fourth Earl of Cassilis captured the abbot of Crossraguel Abbey and, um, block your ears if you're sensitive, roasted him alive until he agreed to sign over his lands. Sir Archibald the Wicked of Culzean was a man so evil that it is said the devil himself attended his funeral. There are stories around this particular castle of a knight in full armour who appears to household staff, and a phantom piper who plays on stormy nights as the waves pounds the cliff's face far below. It seems, of course, that if you get a suitable amount of wickedness in a place, it can cause all kinds of things, and ghosts are the least thereof. But they say there is more than simply that, and you get to listen to the haunting cries of the bagpipes, already fairly ghostly in and of themselves, but I wonder just how particularly haunting they sound played by a ghost. So, an interesting question, and one that we don't know the answer to just yet, but let us move on to another famous place, and also in very good nick and more house-like than the traditional view of castle that we have, and that's Brodick Castle. And beneath the towering peak of Goat Fell lies a castle with 800 years of ghost stories and paranormal activities. There are so many accounts that we must touch on just a few, such as the Grey Lady, a strange and semi-transparent lady seen to wander around the rooms. The White Stag, a ghostly stag that runs around the gardens and lands of the castle. Wonder how it came to be a ghost. Of course, naturally, there are plenty of um, tales of murder and the resultant supernatural that hang there. And speaking of hanging, um, there is the hanging tree, where those accused of crimes were hung, and where they have what is known as the portcullis, where the plague victims were entombed. And there is even a place where castle pets refuse to cross at all, just in case, because after all, you never quite know what is out there. And I dare say if the pets won't go there, you probably want to step a little careful as well. There is also Pollock House, uh, a lovely mansion indeed, where you may find the blood-curdling tale of the bewitched baronet and hear stories of the witches of Pollock. In the 1670s, Janet Douglas, a mute serving girl, arrived at the Pollock estate of Sir George Maxwell, who shortly thereafter fell mysteriously ill. Janet regained the power of speech, however, and immediately accused 5 local people of consorting with the devil. They were quickly brought in, and their trial was short-lived, and they were subsequently burnt at the stake. And this is rather strange because there were a great many tales around not only the trial and the so-called witches, but also of Janet herself. She was reputed to have traveled to America and was even involved in the infamous Salem witch trials of 1692. Was it possible that there was more to this so-called serving girl than meets the eye? That's a very good question, and one which we are not given answer to, but when we get to talking about witches, which we will definitely be talking about Salem, and we shall absolutely have to see if there was a certain Janet Douglas involved, because after all, perhaps there is more plot than we thought. We also have, of course, Greenbank Garden on our list, with several resident ghosts, a wonderful garden oasis, both idyllic and mystical. But as you wander through the beautiful sculpted lawns, look out for the lady in red, who has been encountered both in the gardens and in the dining room of Greenbank House. A large black dog. That is an interesting one because, as we know, animals very rarely appear as ghosts unless there is a very specific reason. And the spectre of a young girl that goes skipping along the little stream, possibly the ghost of a local girl that was tragically killed in the courtyard in the early 20th century. However, it is a wonderful and beautiful garden. So, should you in fact encounter something suitably paranormal, you can always stop at their cafe for a nice cup of tea to settle your nerves. There is the famed Hill House, a domestic architectural masterpiece designed by none other than Charles Rennie Mackintosh and Margaret MacDonald Mackintosh in the early 1900s for the Glasgow publisher Walter Blackie, a quite famous publisher indeed, who incidentally is said to appear occasionally on the upper landing, even though he is now long dead. Dressed in a long black cape, he emerges from the dressing room before vanishing into the main bedroom. And don't be too concerned if you smell somebody smoking a pipe around the library. It's just Walter indulging in his favorite pastime. Much thanks to Venom for those kind likes. You are a charming and wondrous fellow. I do appreciate. The next interesting spot is Gladstone's Land. And Gladstone's Land is an interesting little place with all kinds of historic and ghostly goings on. It is, I believe, a place within Edinburgh. And of course, Edinburgh is well known for having a lot. It's home to the murderous Burke and Hare and the scene of a great many public hangings. And of course, as we have said, you absolutely need to have strong emotion for a ghost to form, and well, execution will do that, will it not? There are all kinds of ghosts and more around Edinburgh, and of course, the castle of Edinburgh as well is full of strange things. The next interesting spot is Culross, a 17th century village with a living open air museum. It is one of the oldest of the villages around, and many of the buildings are still exactly the originals. But here you can listen tales of the Culross witches that were imprisoned and tortured in the townhouse, uh, petty criminals branded for life um, with the S-shaped brand, S for sinner, so all would know. Miscreants dragged to the Mercat Cross to have their ears nailed to the town stocks in punishment. I dare say that would put a criminal off quite severely. Um, as we said earlier, the Culross Palace was built by Sir George Bruce in 1600s, and in its stone vaulted strong room, you may even find the evil Sir George counting his money. And though he smiles and waves to children, he gets upset if adults come too close to his fortune. You may also encounter a young and elegantly dressed Mary Erskine holding a bouquet of lavender as she admires the palace garden. Her family purchased the palace in the early 18th century, but since then she has passed on but not out. Many, many thanks for all those likes. You are a true wonder. I much appreciate. The next interesting place is much more castle-like as the castles go. As we know, many of the Scottish castles are in fact more house-like. But this one looks a lot more like your typical castle, basically a crenellated square block. And this is a 700-year-old keep, the oldest in Scotland, and home to varying ghost stories from across the centuries. It also is the place of the abbot's curse, and you may visit the dungeons where the spectre of a man in chains is helped by a ghostly serving girl who bandages his rat-gnawed foot sometimes. In the great hall, you may encounter a young girl trapped in a stone well, a woman dressed in black that watches over a cradle, and a nervous maid pacing up and down close to a family portrait that depicts the Alloa Tower with an adjoining mansion, the mansion itself having burnt to the ground in the August of 1800s when a maid placed a lit candle too close to bedclothes. On the anniversary of the fire, uh, often visitors will say that they can smell something burning, and it seems that the tragedy is indelibly marked upon the history of the building. In the charter room, you might find a young boy crying, an armed man with strange eyes, or a gaunt clergyman dressed in black. But most frightening of all is the solar room, where a man has been seen hanged, and you may be overcome by the physical sensation that you too are being strangled. Now, of course, as we talk about these ghosts, we realize that they fit to quite a number of the different ranks of ghosts we have encountered. Apparitions certainly are a relatively powerful ghost to actually be seen, and with it comes all of the expected, the cold spots and the ghostly orbs and more. But for things to actually become somewhat physical, the smell of burning and the sensation that you are being strangled absolutely indicates a much higher grade of ghost that is nearing the poltergeist level. So perhaps a certain amount of care if visiting this place. Welcome to all of you new guys who have joined in. I do hope you enjoy the supernatural and paranormal feel very, very well Welcome to like, share, subscribe, give comments and opinions, and what else, and ask any questions you like, as long as they are in keeping with our discussions. You would be more than welcome. Now, our next interesting place is Falkland Palace. And of course, historically, it is very, very famous as it was besieged by Rob Roy himself, partly destroyed by Cromwell's troops. The palace has had a turbulent history indeed, soaked in murder and despair. In 1402, the Duke of Rothesay, heir to the Scottish throne, was imprisoned in Falkland Castle, where he reputedly starved to death. In 1542, James V's body lay in state in the Chapel Royal for almost a full month before being taken to Holyrood Abbey and buried. Over the years, the palace has had visits from the ghosts of Mary, Queen of Scots, the White Lady that roams the Tapestry Gallery awaiting her lost lover who never comes, and the ghostly Grey Lady who walks the ruins of the East Range and disappears through a wall where there was once a door. Most chilling of all are the sinister faces that appear at the window of the Queen's room. Now, of course, here again we come up with a thing which has become one of our questions as yet unanswered. Can ghosts actually walk through walls, or is it in fact the case that they can only walk through walls where there was a way through while they were alive? Can ghosts, in fact, walk through or move through glass? Because it seems that they can't. I have as yet never encountered a ghost traveling through a glass, certainly being seen outside or being seen within, but not traveling through. So it seems that there are, in fact, rules that bind even the dead, um, which makes for very interesting. I don't know what your opinion is on all of that, and I would absolutely enjoy hearing either your opinion or if you have an answer that you have discovered from somewhere. Kelly Castle, a lovely castle, and once home to the daughter of Robert the Bruce himself. It is brimming with ghosts to its very battlements. Dating from 1360, the oldest tower is said to be haunted by the spirit of the very specific Anne Erskine, who died there when she fell from an upstairs window. Fell. Yes. We all know what that means, don't we? She makes her presence known only on occasion, but though rarely seen when she does, it is usually the thump of her footsteps on the turnpike staircase. The Professor James Lorimer's ghost also uh, appears, he who began the restoration of the castle in 1878, seen seated in quiet contemplation, as befits a professor, of course. Um, they do say that they tried to exorcise Kelly Castle once, but it simply didn't take. Ghosts are sometimes stronger than the faith of those that try. But as we move along, there is, of course, more to speak about. We do enjoy the hauntings and the horrible, and the next one up is the House of Dun. Much thanks for your Your kind likes there I always appreciate and welcome to you. Um, so here we have a true classic in terms of ghosts. We have, of course, Around the Lanes at Night, seeking retribution on unwary travelers, a genuine headless horseman. This stunning Georgian mansion with its surrounding estate holds many a dark secret, including, of course, that of the harpist murdered at the Den of Dun on the very spot where his ghost has been seen playing musical laments. You may also encounter the phantom of a knight who, upon returning from the Crusades, discovered his wife had been tricked into marrying his friend. Not much of a friend. A sword fight ensued, of course, and the usurper was run through and impaled on an ancient yew tree, as is fitting. And the ghost of the usurper might maybe, on the right night, be seen stuck there still. Now, the next place that we have is again a more traditional style castle, more a keep than a castle, I would say. Um, Drum Castle. Fine place indeed for a good Scottish family. And this was, in fact, gifted to the Irvines by Robert the Bruce himself in 1323. It is one of the oldest tower houses in Scotland. And of course, within you can find the apparitions of Anna Forbes Irvine, who died in the 1900s, to the haunting laughter of their son, Alexander, who tragically died at age 6 in 1865. There are family heirlooms which inexplicably move in the night, and the ghostly footsteps in the dark. In 2014, one of the resident ghosts of Drum was even captured on camera, which featured extensively in local and national press. Now, of course, here again we see some interesting points to consider. You have those ghosts that are not quite strong enough to appear, but which you can hear. This happy little lad that still haunts the place. But we also encounter another thing, that ghosts do not only haunt places, but things particularly as well. And the fact that certain family heirlooms move seem to imply that it is the things that are haunted more than the place, and one wonders what stories they hide. Nevertheless, as we move along, Crace Castle, there is the Green Lady's Room, named after the spirit of a young woman who has often been seen by the fireplace, wearing a green dress and cradling an infant in her arms. When the castle was renovated in the 1800s, the bones of a child presumed murdered were discovered under the hearthstone of the fireplace, and it seems that whatever sins occurred, the ghosts do not forget. The archives also tell of an unearthly appearance of a slightly luminous block of ice that moves like someone walking but is not human in shape. Um, these visions are always accompanied by an extremely sharp drop in room temperature, and one wonders what it might be that it appears as a block of ice? Hard to say. The Tower House is also the home to a white lady. Now, we've encountered white ladies in virtually every country and culture that we have been to, regardless. So it seems that white ladies are an incredibly common form of ghost. Um, they think that this particular white lady is Alexander Burnet's young lover, Bertha, poisoned by Lady Agnes for being unworthy of her son's hand in marriage. Bertha visits on the anniversary of her murder, and we wonder exactly what happened to Lady Agnes. Perhaps she is the block of ice, her heart frozen even while she was alive. A suitably fitting ghostly. Next up we have Leith Hall, home of the Leith Hay family for nearly 400 years. Leith Hall is haunted by the ghost of John Leith, who was shot in 1763 in a drunken brawl in Aberdeen. He was brought home injured, but died on Christmas Day 3 days later. Wearing his dark green trousers and a shirt, he appears in great pain, lamenting his injuries with a dirty white bandage wrapped around his head and covering his eyes. It seems that he never got over his death. Other sightings include the apparitions of a family dog and children playing. It must have been a very loyal dog indeed to have remained. By and large, animals never have any particular worry that keeps them behind, and in general, it is usually a great attachment to a family that causes an animal to stay. It's quite sweet. Castle Fraser, one of the grandest castles of Mar. It is full of quirky features, including secret staircases, trapdoors, and spy holes. Over the years, of course, there have been numerous sightings of a young woman who was murdered in the Green Room, her bloodied body dragged down the round tower, staining the steps to such an extent that they had to be covered in wooden paneling, which remains to this day. Dressed in a long black gown, the ghost of Lady Blanche Drummond, who died in 1874, wanders the castles and its grounds. Whispers, laughter, and music have also been heard in the great hall, almost as if what was still is, and that some ghosts never leave. Welcome, welcome to all my new joiners. I hope you are enjoying. Next up is Haddo House, an elegant Georgian mansion that was home to the Gordon family for over 400 years. One of its most famous residents was Lord Archibald Gordon, affectionately known as Archie. Unfortunately, he died in 1909, one of the first people in Britain to be killed in a car accident. I mean, cars were not a thing for a very long time. Ah, what fame that might be. Dressed in his hunting tweeds and with a shock of ginger hair, Archie's ghost is often seen smiling and even trying to talk to visitors. So apparently, it wasn't so terrible at all, even though it, for some reason, kept him behind. It is quite possible for ghosts to remain, of course, for good reasons, if there is a sufficiency of emotion. It can be good, it's just very often not. Haddo is also home to a slightly more menacing supernatural side, where locked attic doors shake violently and staff have been threatened and chased by spirits through the corridors and cellars. And it seems that while good old Archie is a fine fellow indeed, even after all this time, not all of the ghosts there are terribly happy. Fyvie Castle, a place full of murder and betrayal that casts a spine-chilling shadow over this 800-year-old Scottish baronial fortress. When the room temperature drops suddenly and the air is filled with the scent of roses, it is said that you are in the presence of the ghost of Lilias Drummond, the Green Lady. Legend has it that Lilias was starved to death by her husband for failing to provide a son and heir. Her husband, Alexandra Seton, was clearly a right bastard. On the night of his second marriage, however, her ghostly laments were heard outside the marital bedchamber, and in the morning, and still visible today. Her name was found freshly scratched into the castle walls, so perhaps she got her revenge after all. There are phantom soldiers, poltergeists, and the curse of the weeping stones to be considered as well, and the secret burial chamber of the Green Lady, whose remains were discovered walled up in the castle walls, and whose spirit roams the passageways to this day. So, yeah, poltergeists, as we know, are the highest of the level of ghosts, able to physically affect the environment. So, absolutely a suitably creepy one. Brodie Castle, home to the Brodie family for nearly 450 years. This iconic 16th century Scottish tower house has experienced a number of ghostly sightings over the centuries. In the blue sitting room, a phantom uniformed soldier has been sitting in contemplation. The spectre of a small dog has been spotted heading to the children's nursery, and that right there is truly sweet. And occasionally the ghost of Lady Margaret, wife of the 21st Brodie of Brodie, visits the best bedchamber, where sadly she died in a fire in 1786. I like the idea of a cute little ghosty dog. I wonder if you can get ghosty biscuits for it. Hugh Miller's Birthplace Cottage and Museum. Now, as we know, we have ranked the places most likely to get ghosts. The top ones in no particular order are hospitals, battlefields, be they out in a field or on a castle, and roads, where a great number of deaths occur. However, coming in hard at number 4 are museums, simply because ghosts can attach to items, it seems, and after all, what are museums but collections of ancient items? Visit the thatched cottage where Hugh Miller wrote of local legends and spine-chilling ghost stories. You can hear the tale of the severed hand, an apparition that reached out to him as a child on the night that his own father perished in a shipwreck. You may learn about the visions of Hugh's great grandfather, the Scottish buccaneer, no less, John Fiddies, and visit the little antique room where things move. And don't look too closely into any particular reflective surface, just in case, because it's possible you might see more than your own eyes looking back at you. The next interesting place is Killiecrankie, and on the 27th of July 1689, the peace and tranquility of this beautiful gorge was shattered when the very first shots in the Jacobite cause were fired. One soldier escaped by making a spectacular jump across the River Garry at the spot now known as Soldier's Leap. On the anniversary of the battle, the pass of Killiecrankie is said to ring with the sounds of footsteps as the government army marched to their doom. Other accounts describe the terrifying encounters with a gruesome floating head. It's one thing to find a headless horseman, but what about a horsemanless head? Haha. A small turnaround. Imagine just seeing a head turn up behind you. That would be suitably creepy, I dare say, and something to raise chills along your spine. But as we must progress, Scotland, of course, has a huge number of haunted places, from Abergeldy Castle, a 4-floor tower house that is found. My eyes are a little dry tonight, I apologize. In southwest Aberdeenshire in Scotland. It is quite an interesting place indeed. And of course, is not that far from the royal residence of Balmoral. There are quite a few places around that we must pick from, simply because we can't talk of them all. But we are going to speak of a couple of the top ones, if you will, to ensure that we can keep our hauntings relevant, including, of course, a few that I think might be interesting. Just to speak of our ghostly types, as it were. There are quite a few specifics, if you will, some of which I think we have to be covering, simply because they're just so different. So, Abergeldy Castle, it's a more typical style, if you will, for Scotland, of a tower house, which basically they're a cross between a house and a castle, a fortified house that became quite popular in the Middle Ages. This particular one, the name derives from the language of the Picts, meaning the confluence of Gaeilge, where nearby the castle, you have the meeting of the river Geldi and the river Dee, which might mean shining bright. So the confluence of the shining bright river. There is a standing stone nearby from the Bronze Age, which is pretty old if you think about it. So the site itself is really old, and it has one of the longest unbroken records of ownership, being in the hands of the Gordon family for 600 years, built around 1550 by Sir Alexander Gordon of Midmar, the son of the first Earl of Huntly, on grounds acquired by the Gordon family in 1482. Now, during the course of the Jacobite Rising, the castle was besieged by the Jacobite forces. So it's got a lot of history. And of course, this goes right through up until today. And here we find that even royalty has stayed in the manor house over the years. So quite an interesting place indeed. But more interesting is the fact that the castle is haunted not by a Scottish ghost, but by a French ghost. The spirit of a French serving woman named Catherine Ranke, known as French Kate. According to the stories, she was accused of being a witch and was imprisoned in the cellars before being burned at the stake. Quite a traditional way to deal with witches in Scotland, it seems. Contrary to what many believe, the so-called burning of witches was not really a thing in a lot of places at all. Not to say that the witches weren't executed, but burning was generally not the method. Why? I don't know. She was burned nearby on Craignaban, known as the Rock of the Women, that overlooks the castle. And since that time, Kate's ghost has been said to be seen in both the cellars and at the clock tower. So, witch and ghost in her life. Perhaps that's an achievement. The next one is Androssan Castle on the west coast of Scotland. A keep dating from the 15th century, which is quite an interesting one and has been rebuilt and done up several times during its existence. And it's needed a fair bit. The ruins of the castle are simply that now, and they still stand, but they are somewhat hazardous. It has not withstood the test of time. It is haunted, apparently, by the ghost of none other than William Wallace himself, who is said to wander the ruins on stormy nights. But it's also associated with the devil himself. Sir Fergus Barclay, known as the Devil of Ardrossan, was a horseman famous around the lands for his tremendous skill. But the secret to his skill, however, was apparently a magical bridle given to Barclay by the devil himself in exchange for his soul. But Barclay managed to trick the devil into giving his soul back, and in his rage at being tricked, the devil attacked the castle. The result of this rage attack by the devil is that cloven hoof prints have been left on one of the rocks. Sir Fergus Barclay himself is buried in the castle chapel, situated a few yards inland from the castle, slightly further down the hill. So his ghost is there, unfettered by the devil that he cheated. Was he a hero, or was he a rogue? Perhaps both. Next is Dornoch Castle, situated opposite Dornoch Cathedral in, surprisingly, the town of Dornoch in Sutherland, Scotland, about 40 miles north of Inverness. And as of 2021, it was operated as a family-run hotel with 24 rooms that you can stay in. A fantastic and old castle built around 1500, and the home of the bishops of Caithness. So varying things have happened over its history. The castle was set alight when a feud occurred in 1570 between the Mackays and the Murrays, and the rebuilding that followed included additions. The castle is believed to have been haunted by the ghost of the Covenanter, Andrew McCornish, who was hung for sheep stealing. And as we know well, back in the day, sheep stealing was a fairly serious crime, and as a result, you can't be going around and doing such things. It's nice to say at least that the castle has been built up again despite the centuries of damage to it, and is now in full use, despite its ghost. Now, of course, you can't talk Scotland without talking Edinburgh Castle. In terms of historical places and haunted places, Edinburgh Castle, absolutely, and as you can imagine, it is one of the most historic and well-known castles, and is, unsurprisingly, on Castle Rock in Edinburgh. It has been occupied by humans since at least the Iron Age, not the castle, the place. There has been a royal castle on the rock since the reign of Malcolm III in the 11th century, and it has been a royal residence right up until 1633. After the 15th century, its residential role declined, and by the 17th century, it was mostly used as a military garrison. But nevertheless, it is massively important to Scottish history, and it served as a royal residence, an arsenal, a treasury, a national archive, a mint, a prison, a military fortress, and the home of the Honours of Scotland, the official Scottish regalia. Probably the most important, certainly one of the most important strongholds in Scotland, and of course has been involved in a huge number of conflicts from the wars for Scottish independence right the way through to the Jacobite uprising, which happened in 1745. Research has shown that in its 1,100-year history, it has withstood 26 sieges, making it one of the most besieged places in Great Britain and one of the most attacked in the world. Few of the President buildings, however, predate the Lang Siege of 1573, where artillery bombardment destroyed quite a bit of it. But there are exceptions. St. Margaret's Chapel from the 12th century which is regarded as the oldest building in Edinburgh. Fantastic story, of course, and the history is massive. Um, a great number of interesting uh, things that went around, all of which we, alas, do not have the time to go into in all of the different ages and the wars, but nevertheless, which um, has a great deal of ghosts from all of its different times, including its time as a prison. And as you can imagine, this means that uh, you're almost certain to encounter something if you visit. There's so much going on that you can scarcely not. Um, there are so many uh, interesting things to speak of that really I'm not going to even go into all of it at all, uh, because we would be doing nothing more than that. But you may be absolutely certain that if it's a ghost that you require, you will find it there and need fear not to miss out. Uh, Also in Edinburgh is the Festival Theatre, um, an interesting place that has been renovated many times and quite recently as well. It is Edinburgh's longest continuous theatre site. There's been a theatre in that location since 1830, which is kind of impressive if you think about it. There was a fire in 1911, um, which, funnily enough, was so well organized that all 3,000 theatergoers escaped in 2.5 minutes. Uh, However, sadly, backstage there were 11 deaths, including the illusionist Sigmund Newberg, who was taking his final bow as the Great Lefet, his body double, and the lion from his axe. 3 months later, though, the theatre was open again. They've had some great people there, of course, Laurel and Hardy, Morecambe and Wise, Harry Worth, and more. Margot Fontaine, and the Royal Ballet and the Royal Opera have even been there, which is quite important. However, what we want to know about is the supernatural, and charmingly, perhaps, the ghost that haunts it is a tall, dark stranger who is very probably the famous illusionist Sigmund Neuberger, the great Lafette that died there in 1911. A magical ghost, if you will. So, something to talk about. Now you see him, now you don't. But nevertheless, and as we go along, we must talk about the Edinburgh vaults. Now, also known as the Southbridge vaults, they are a number of chambers forward in the arches of Southbridge in Edinburgh. The Southbridge was part of the Southbridge Act of 1785 and was completed in 1788. And for 30 years, the vaults housed taverns, workshops, and other tradesmen's places, as well as storage space. In later years, they were a hotspot for the homeless and for criminal activities such as illegal gambling dens, uh, whiskey distilleries, and, according to rumor, body snatchers stored corpses there overnight. Um, It is rumored, but not proved, that the famous serial killers Burke and Hare used the vaults, but this is not certain. The air there is damp and the conditions are not very good. So in the 1820s, uh, the businesses all left. Um, and it is said that even the poorest that lived there left by the 1860s. Um, Signs remained when they were excavated, um, showing that humans had indeed lived in the place. But more than that, we cannot say. It has a long and interesting history, um, in fact, uh, including the fact that the vaults were rediscovered in the 1980s by the Scottish rugby internationalist Norrie Rowan after he found a tunnel leading to them. And from this tunnel, he helped Romanian rugby player Cristian Raducanu escape the Romanian secret police and seek political asylum weeks before the Romanian Revolution of 1989. Um, these vaults were then excavated by Norrie Rowan and his son in the 1990s, and very interesting artifacts were found. Now, they have been investigated by ghost hunters who have claimed that they had numerous encounters there, and indeed, in 2003, they were investigated. And in 2006 and in 2009. And they said that voices were heard during an overnight sleepover there. Um, and the man that did that made recordings while he was there, but said he never heard the voices. They turned up afterwards, only in the recording. Um, They were heard some 20 minutes before abruptly ceasing after what appears to be the sound of children yelling. BBC sound engineers initially thought the sounds might be explained by voices from nearby nightclubs, but the actual source proved not to be identifiable. Um, so they say that you can still hear ghosts there. Whether or not you actually can see anything is debatable. But very briefly, we are going to jump from the ghost to the cause of ghosts and talk about the Burke and Hare murders, a series of 16 murders committed over a period of about 10 months in 1828 in Edinburgh. They were undertaken by William Burke and William Hare, who sold the corpses to Robert Knox for dissection and anatomy lectures. He was a Scottish anatomist and ethnologist, best known because he bought corpses from these two miscreants. Um, he was famous and did much learning, but the demand for cadavers was higher than the availability, and it was said that, according to Scottish law, corpses used for medical research could only come from those who died in prison, suicide victims, or from foundlings and orphans. And sadly, because there's human nature for you, this led to body snatching by what were known as the resurrection men, and measures to ensure graves were left undisturbed, such as the use of mort safes, it's basically a cage over the grave, um, made the shortage even worse. When a lodger in Hare's house died, he turned to his friend Burke and between them decided to sell the body to Knox, where he received what was for them a very generous sum of £7 and 10 shillings. And they thought, hello. A little over 2 months later, Hare was concerned that one of his lodgers had a fever and would deter others, so he and Burke thought, you know what? So they murdered her and sold the body to Knox, and then thought, you know what? So they went around and murdered more people, um, probably with the knowledge of their wives. Their actions were uncovered only after other lodgers discovered their last victim, Margaret Doherty, and contacted the police. A forensic examination of Doherty's body indicated she had probably been suffocated, but this could not be proven at the time. They suspected Burke and Hare of other murders, but there was no evidence to take action on. So they offered Hare an immunity from prosecution if he turned King's evidence, which he did, and provided the details of Doherty's murder and confessed to all 16 deaths. Burke was then charged, along with his wife, for 3 murders, and at the subsequent trial, he was found guilty of at least 1 and sentenced to death. The case against his wife was not proved, and a Scottish legal verdict to acquit an individual was required when guilt is not proved. Burke, however, was hanged, and his corpse was dissected and his skeleton displayed at the Anatomical Museum. And in 2025, it is still there, showing, well, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword, and if you live by the body snatching, guess what? An interesting story indeed, if a chilling one. The next place is Her Majesty's Prison, Castle Huntly, a castle in Scotland now used as a prison, located 7 miles west of Dundee on the Carse of Gowrie, Perth and Kinross, close to the shore of the Firth of Tay, which I'm sure means nothing to most people who have never been to Scotland. An interesting place surrounded by what is now farmland, but at the time would have been a marshy wilderness, and that made it very, very defensible. It's hard to charge a castle over marsh. Lord Grey of Fowlis built the castle in 1452 under license from James II of Scotland. It has changed hands a few times. And in the excuse me, in the end, the castle was taken over and then turned into a prison. It is the only open prison in Scotland. Prisoners at the establishment are all very low risk, with short sentences up to 2 years. So not for serious places. However, they do say that over its history, the odd ghost has been encountered, and in fact, therein you might find various spectres that wander around inside this ghostly place. Why not? Prisons are known to be a good source of suitable frighteningness. Hulk Hogan died. Yes, he did. It seems a great many of our greats have passed on. Hulk Hogan, Ozzy Osbourne, and more. Quite sad. Um, but I hope that they had a sufficiently awesome passing that they will not return as ghosts. The next interesting spot that we are going to have to talk about is Stirling Castle. Stirling Castle, of course, is one of the largest and most historically and architecturally important castles in Scotland, on the top of an intrusive crag that is part of the Stirling Sill geological formation. And below it, the River Forth, and therefore, because of its situation, a very important fortification for defense. Now, most of the principal buildings come from the 15th and 16th centuries. A few remain from the 14th centuries, but the outer defenses from the 18th century. Before the union with England, it was used by the many Scottish royals as the main residence and a palace as well as a fortress. Several Scottish kings and queens have been crowned there, including the famous Mary, Queen of Scots, and several have both been born there or died there. There have been at least 8 sieges of the castle, the last being in 1746, where Bonnie Prince Charlie unsuccessfully tried to take the castle. So lots to be said, huge amounts of history. The Romans were around when there was a castle or a hill fort, let us call it, in the area, even when the Romans were trying to get around, but they were not very successful, alas. There are all kinds of different groups and people, the Picts and the Meate and more. But there are too many to really go into in detail. Some do say that King Arthur had court here, if he really exists. He may have, possibly not quite as in the Mont d'Arthur, but nevertheless. The first record of Stirling Castle dates from 1110, when King Alexander I dedicated a chapel there. But it appears to have been an established royal centre by this time. So it's very likely the actual castle itself has been there well long indeed. So you can expect a great many ghosts, cold spots, and other strange events that have happened there. Ghosts walk the halls from a number of different times, and they say that it's quite possible you can meet more than one royal, which absolutely is an interesting reality indeed. It's huge. There is all sorts in there. There is a green lady, whatever that might encounter or mean, a a ghost that has been sighted by a number of both residents and visitors over the years. It's thought that she was a maidservant who rescued Queen Mary from a perilous situation. Uh, and they say that she returns as a warning of impending danger, generally in the form of fire. But there are plenty of other ghosts, and they all fall in line with the accepted um, scariness that we have come to exceedingly believe should be there. Um, the toll booth, an interesting place that was a jail for a while, is a museum now. You can go there to see the prison cells with their barred windows and doors, and the guillotine, which was used to execute convicted prisoners. There's a cell known as the Jacobite cell, where there's an interactive model of Willibert uh, with his Jacobite compatriots, James Innes and Alexander Anand, and they will tell you about their life while they await trial and sentencing. Um, the Aberdeen City Council turned the toll booth into a jail, from a jail, into a public building in 1995. It's been investigated by quite a lot of different groups, but the museum celebrated its 400th anniversary in 2016, so it's not been too much used for too many things for a while. Possibly the um, creepiest part of it all was in the 18th century, uh, children were imprisoned there before transporting them to America to work as slaves, street children, and more that were snatched. Suitably creepy. Now, of course, we have gone through what we can um, speak of as a crapload of ghosts. Um, so we're going to talk of just one or two more and then go straight on to the cryptids. Mary King's Close in Edinburgh, standing in the dark, narrow close and wynds that slope between the tall, gaunt buildings that line the ridge known as the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, you find yourself already being haunted by the very landscape. In the Middle Ages, this was one of the most densely populated and disease ridden quarters in Europe. Uh, and go there as you dare, because this area was smallish and confined by the city wall, so their expansion was upwards, making stark tenements that were huge for its time, rising 9, 10, and even 11 stories high, with walkways between them. And even today, it's not for the faint of heart, and the ghosts and sinister happenings are many. Uh, Buried beneath the buildings of the city chambers, there is a hidden close that historically is even more horrifying than that above ground. Mary King's Close. Plague, of course, was a frequent visitor in the past, and in the squalid and rat infested tenements, it was awful. But the worst visitations came in 1645, and the residents of Mary King's Close were absolutely decimated by it. The city fathers, an ill conceived and barbaric attempt to contain the contagion, walled the neighborhood off and left the residents to die in what must have been absolutely unimaginable horror. When finally the pestilence abated and the stench from the corpses had become so unbearable that they needed to clear it. The authorities sent 2 butchers to clear away the detritus. The men, not knowing what else to do with so many, simply hacked the rotting cadavers to pieces, loaded them onto a cart, and wheeled them away. It just was not good. And the ghosts of the plague year remained, and such was the shortage of accommodation that new residents came to live there nevertheless. Thomas Coulthart, a lawyer, and his wife were beset at their home by numerous apparitions. The disembodied head of an old man with a grey beard and terrible eyes was seen floating around their rooms. It was sometimes accompanied by a severed arm, which seemed intent on shaking Thomas Coulthart by the hand. A ghostly child appeared, along with a menagerie of strange, deformed phantom animals that paraded before the terrified and astonished couple. The upper stories, however, of the close were demolished in 1750, and the Royal Exchange constructed here. But it seems that the city merchants didn't want to even go there and did their business in the streets. So it was just too haunted. A tall lady dressed in a black gown is just one of the ghosts wandering the streets there, fleeting visions of a short elderly man with a troubled expression, the poignant earthbound spirit of a little girl whose lank hair hangs over a paled face that is covered in weeping plague sores. She was discovered by a Japanese medium, apparently, and they say that the medium was brought in from Japan and told nothing. Excuse me 1 second. I do apologize for that. So brought in blind, not knowing anything about what may or may not be encountered there, but was dead right. Stepping into one of the rooms, the medium was overwhelmed by a disturbingly depressive aura, and as she turned to leave, someone tugged on her trouser leg. Going back, she found the young girl weeping in a corner, who told her that she had died of the sickness in 1645. She said that she lost her doll and was unhappy, and moved by the television crew that were doing this, brought her a doll and left it in the room. And since then, it's become a thing that visitors leave presents for this ghostly girl. And there is a bizarre collection of toys, dolls, and books piled in the corner of the room for this poor child. We do hope that finally she is happy. We don't know, however, but the ghosts nevertheless remain. Now, in the Highlands, of course, we have Ravenswood House, and here you might chance upon a bearded figure in an Aran sweater, the arms rolled to the elbows, and a long-sleeved vest. You might bid him good day, and you might be tempted to have a chat. But what you might not realize is that this delightful old chum is one of the ghosts that wanders the house. Ravenswood is the proud possessor of a fully functional Victorian lavatory, now used as a ladies' toilet. Fascinating, if a little strange, if you ask me. The ghost of the house's builder and original owner is a seafaring man who erected the property in 1820, and his cargoes consisted largely of tea and alcohol. But he he has a clause inserted into the lease of the house that forbids the sale of either. Um, but, well, it's now a hotel, and the ban has been lifted, but not the one on tea. So you can have a cup of hot water with a spoon and milk, but the accompanying tea bag is free because they don't sell that. Nevertheless, uh, the ghostly mariner has been encountered by many guests, all of whom have commented that he looks just like an ordinary person, which shows a very strong spirit indeed. And many have not even realized that he was a ghost until they asked the owners who he was, and they were told, no, he's dead. The other ghostly inhabitant is a spectral nanny who only becomes active when small children come to stay. She's never actually been seen, but babies have been heard over their um, baby speaker gurgling and calling nanny to an unseen presence. When adults investigate, they find the child staring at someone only it can see and very happy. Um, Laughing even, uh, and pointing at their feet as if the ghost is tickling them. So they are sweet ghosts to be found there, and no harm shall come. But they are nevertheless dead. Now, moving along, because we cannot touch on every ghost, we must talk about a few of the cryptids. And you've got to start with the Loch Ness, let's be fair. The Loch Ness Monster, dear old Nessie, the one by which we judge all other cryptids, the most famous cryptid in the world, in Loch Ness, a large freshwater lake. Uh, and this is almost certainly what we would refer to as a prehistoric cryptid, one which may well be either the story of a ancient memory of a dinosaur, or perhaps the last remaining of the dinosaurs. And we find exact descriptions in so many different uh, countries and cultures that it seems that this beast certainly must have existed at some stage. Whether it does now depends on who you ask, but it is the world's most famous cryptid of all. The next interesting one are the Kelpie. They are a shape-shifting water spirit, frequently taking the form of a horse that lures a traveler to its watery death. They say that if you encounter a Kelpie and try to ride it, you cannot get off, and it will run straight as an arrow to its water home and drown you. The most famous Keltie stories, of course, are tied to both Loch Marie and the famous Loch Ness. The next horrifying cryptid is the Nuclavy, which we have encountered similar things as we have the Kelpie. This horrifying one is a combination of a horse and a man with grotesque appearance, um, and is capable of spreading pestilence and destruction. Uh, Basically, a Scottish centaur. Apparently, only the Miser of the Sea can manage to control it, and it will bring great sadness to you, which is pretty cool. The next and the most wondrous are the Selkies, also shapeshifters that can transform between a human and a seal through the use of their seal skin. Stories of the Selkies are common in Celtic and Norse folklore as well, and in the Orkneys and Shetland Isles. And they're said to be kind and good as long as you are too. There are also the Blue Men of Minch, human-sized blue-skinned creatures who live in the sea and create storms and capsize ships. They appear in some ways to be a version, if you will, and a rather aggressive version of merfolk. Much thanks for the loves there, Karina. It is always good to have you on board. And if you've got any questions, don't forget to ask. And thank you for the presences. We love them. Now, the next thing we need to talk about is the Balvan She. And if you know anything about Scottish pronunciation, you will know that the spelling is totally different. It's spelled Baobhansith, and it is pronounced Balvanshi. Why? I don't know. But this is a female vampire from Highland folklore, appearing as a beautiful woman to seduce men before revealing her true bloodthirsty nature and killing them. You also have the Wulva, which is a werewolf, basically, but a gentle one that will often leave food for the poor. The Bani, which is similar to a Banshee, Banshee being Irish, the Bani being Scottish, but again, a woman seen by a river or water source washing blood-stained clothes. And if you see her, either you or someone near to you is about to pass on. You also have the Ech like a kelpie, but far more dangerous. Not only will it drown you, it will eat you. So as we troll along and we look at these creatures, um, there are varying possible places you could go throughout the Highlands and more, from Galloway right down, going up through Glasgow and Argyll, Tayside, and of course there into the Highlands themselves and the islands that matter. The Highland Islands, of course, are fascinating. You find about the sisters and the curse, the kingdom of the Green Mountains, the Nucklavi and the Kelpie's Bridle. Fine stories that you may be told and quite frightening in their own ways. But as we go along, we're going to skip the folk tales and rather speak instead more of how many times has the Loch Ness Monster been seen, and is it really real? The most famous photograph is, of course, the one that a surgeon took in 1934, which they say is a hoax. Maybe, maybe not. The earliest report goes back to 565 and was seen by a chap known as Saint Columba. You would think a saint would absolutely tell the truth. And they say that the beast was seen and attacked a man swimming, but Saint Columba stepped forward and with the sign of the cross drove it away. And it was, of course, therefore a miracle. So, don't know. D. Mackenzie of Balnain saw the creature in 1871. Alexander MacDonald in 1888, Aldie Mackay in 1933, George Spicer also 1933, Hugh Gray also 1933, and Arthur Grant in 1934. The photograph was taken in 1934 by a surgeon. Though they say that's a hoax now, it was seen in 1938, 1954, 1955, 1960, 1977, 2007. A sonar image was taken of what might be Nessie in 2011, and a photograph in 2011, 2013, 2014, and drone footage was taken in 2021. So, has it been seen? Oh, yeah, I think we can safely say it has. But as we go along, we must talk about a few different creatures from the Bani, the Kelpie, the Selkie, the Loch Ness, and more. They're all out there and are famed among the Scots. But what exactly are they? I think it's fair to say that it's a difficult question. Exactly. The fact that, for example, their centaur-like creature, the Nuckelavee, is skinless, puts a whole new tone of horror upon it. And one wonders precisely what the heck is going on in Scotland. Selkies, of course, are nice, and they have a dual nature, friendly and helpful, but dangerous and vengeful. They are attractive and seductive, and many stories involve them becoming the wife of a man, as long as he never tries to find out more. They come and they go, and if you know they're a Selkie, they're gone. Some have been said to steal the Selkie's skin, forcing them to stay behind and marry them. But if they ever get their skin back, be sure they'll vanish. So, the Scottish legends of the Selkie. There are all kinds of different stories about them and parallels all over, dependent on. And you might ask the most important question: what happens if a Selkie has a child with a human? Are they born Selkie or human? Well, according to legend, the children of male Selkies and human women have webbed toes and fingers, whereas they do not say what happens when a female Selkie has a child with a man that is human. It's quite possible that they've never found out, because the women, the female Selkies, always manage to escape. They do say, though, that maybe you'll just never know. And because of their secretive nature, they're not going to tell neither. Why Selkies? Who's to say? But interesting creatures nevertheless. The Iach Yasige, or Wishkia, probably butchered that. often mistaken for a kelpie. The main difference between the two is that this creature lives in the sea, not freshwater, more than it does freshwater like the kelpie. It is a shapeshifter, describes itself as a fine horse or pony, or a handsome man. Um, as a horse, it's only safe for a man to mount if it is ridden in the interior of the land. If a horse can smell or see the water, that will bring your end, as the skin becomes adhesive and the creature then plunges with the stuck-on rider into the dark depths of salt water, drowning their victim and only releasing them when they are dead so that they can devour the creature, which is suitably creepy. In human form, it is a handsome man, and the only way to know that it is not quite human is that there tends to be sand or sometimes water weeds in its hair. And for this reason, lone strangers cause people to be very worried about you, most especially if you are a lone stranger near water. Now, the next interesting Scottish creature that we must speak of is one that is not well known, and that is a goblin known as a red cap. It is one of those that is part of the dark fairy, um, not the Lios Elfar, but the Svat Elfar, not of the court of light, the court of the darkness. And this particular thing has its origin in the borders and is legendary for its murderous rage. It is an elf-like creature, short with hideous teeth and bloodshot red eyes. They have a red cap, and the reason it is red is because they continually soak it in their victim's blood. He is believed to haunt the abandoned castles of Scotland and waits for travellers to visit, then flings stones at them in an attempt to kill. Legend dictates that the goblin can only stain his cap once he has done so, and if the blood dries out, that is a terrible shame. So they're always on the lookout for an unfortunate soul. Different regions of Scotland report sightings of the red cap differently. So Perth depicts him as a little man that lives in Grandfilly Castle and grants visitors that manage to catch a glimpse of him good luck. But the other versions are far, far darker and are known to be truly terrifying. Now, Scotland is a land full of shapeshifters, and another one is a boobrey, which is a gigantic water bird, though sometimes also it turns into a large blood-sucking insect or a kind of horse. Lochs are their homes, the lakes of Scotland, but they hide on land in the overgrown heather. They have a distinctive noise that sound like a roar or snort from a bull. It is malicious, preying on livestock, especially that being transported on ships, as well as other local wildlife, with an appetite that is so strong that local farmers fear it. And it is said that it brings with it famine to those that rely on cattle for their food and their income. Now, having spoken of these varied creatures, we have to say that at the end of the day, there's quite a lot of them. And a number of them do fit the lines of what we have seen in other places, more or less, vampires particularly, and more. But we have not found our favorite, which is the Bigfoot creature. He appears to not like uh, the environs of island type places. So Scotland is not to his taste, and therefore we have not found him there. And in case you're wondering, the reason I'm looking down is I've just been joined by a munchkin who has come to snuggle, as she often does in the evenings with me. She is quite fond of me, and therefore she is always uh, welcome. Now, by no means have we encountered all of Scotland's varied creatures. There are a great number of them around, and a great more ghosts. So therein, we cannot say we have even begun to um, touch on it, but we've certainly seen enough to realize that the ghosts are as we expect, and the cryptids similar in many ways to a number of other places. But we are going to end ourselves off with a particular last one, which is one which I quite like, and which I am almost certain young Munchkin will approve of, and that is the Beast of Buchan. The Beast of Buchan is um, a large cat that has been sighted in the Buchan area of Aberdeenshire since the 1930s. And given the number of sightings, some say that the beast is in fact a ghost of a cryptid. So perhaps it is. But whatever it turns out to be, um, it is not alone, because it is joined in its feline rage uh, with the black dog, an aspect that turns up as a demon, ghost, or shapeshifter uh, that comes out in the night to attack the unwary, black and with glowing red eyes. With that is also the kushi. What is a kushi or a kachi? A kachi is a large spectral cat with a white spot on its chest that haunts the Scottish Highlands. They say it is a fairy cat, and others say it is a witch. Um, but all say that be careful, because this mulk is the assassin of the fair folk. And of course, with the kachi, you have the kushi being the dog version, the size of a small cow. Uh, they have long, dark green coats, and they roam the highlands just waiting to take you out. So, in the terms of these things, it appears that Scotland has as many animal ghosts as they do human ghosts, and perhaps they are something more than that. But who is to say what really is out there? It's a something that perhaps we cannot be certain of, only that we will warn you not to walk the darkness alone, because when you think you are alone, then you will not be. And until then, I do hope you have a wondrous evening. I shall bid you do be careful of the strange creatures, be they cat, dog, or horse, and beware the ghosts, for they are many, and it seems in Scotland especially, they certainly outnumber the living. So we hope at least They stay on their side of the veil and do not make the crossing to our side, because with there being so many more of them than us, if it ever came to a conflict, just remember, they're already dead. You can't kill them. But on that happy note, I shall bid you good night. Sleep deep, sleep sweet, but sleep with one eye open, and perhaps keep a holy object near at hand, just in case, because I do bid you remember, sometimes those things that go bump in the night might very well go bump for you.